DND number 12, Feed My Sheep in Jesus' Name, Chapter 9. Daisy opened the door to the inn and held it open for Brody as he entered holding the large box. There you are, Jody said with a warm smile. Come on in, you three. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Brody, Daisy, and Agent McRee walked inside. What do you got there, son? Toby asked. Brody smiled. We found a mama out in the woods behind the center. We couldn't just leave her there. Toby moved quickly to look into the box, his face changing to one of a little boy at Christmas. Another dog? Caroline asked. Brody grinned at his mother as everyone came to peer into the box. Miss Jody, Brody asked, is it okay? Maybe just until after she gives birth, which she's about to do. Oh, my goodness, yes, of course. We haven't had a dog in the house since Jake's Scout died. She peeked into the box. Oh, she's a big girl. Brody nodded. Where should I take her? Jody thought, let's put her in the extra room down here. She led the way back to the smaller bedroom on the main floor that at one time belonged to Lisa Stewart's mother. He set the box down on the floor, reached in, and carefully lifted the dog out of the box. Well, that box is too small for a whelping box, Toby said immediately. Let's clear out that corner of the room. He turned to Jody. I promise whatever gets messed up, I'll replace. Do you have some old blankets or towels? Jody went to grab a few of both. Toby made an area in the corner. He broke down the cardboard box and laid it flat first, trying to protect the floor. Then he laid the blankets on top of the cardboard. Using the blankets and some storage baskets off a shelf, he designated the area. There. Now the dog will keep the puppies inside this area until we can get a better setup. Jody, I'll buy you a whole new bed and bedspread and baskets, whatever you need, I promise. Jody laughed. Okay, I'll hold you to it. Brody unloaded the dog onto the pad of blankets in the corner and gently stroked her. Toby reached over and did a quick exam. Oh, she's going to give birth soon, for sure. I can feel the contractions. Well, let's leave her to it and come back and check a bit, Brody said. I don't want to mess up dinner. You mean you're hungry, Toby said with a laugh. But really, let's leave her alone for a bit. Let her get oriented. I can't believe all the kids haven't come running, Daisy said. Well, they're all in the music room with Logan and Violet and Gracie with the doors closed, and they're working on a special musical number, Jody offered. Brody nodded. Well, thanks, Miss Jody, for letting us put the little mama here. After dinner, I guess I'll run to the store to buy her some food and a leash. And is there a way to turn up the heat a little in this room? The puppies need it to be warm. Jody nodded and went to the thermostat. How warm do you want it? Brody looked at his father. What do you think, Dad? About 80 degrees? Toby nodded. He smiled at his son. Toby himself had been known in his community as a guy who took in every stray animal he came across. A sick squirrel, a bird with a broken wing, about 9 or 10 dogs, and dozens of cats. He also had goats and pigs. He even had a 3-legged deer at one time, but she died when Brody was about 4 years old. They had a dog, Rascal, who died of old age when Brody was 8. Toby sure did love that dog. Brody had loved him too and took it pretty hard when Rascal passed. Still, it was nice to see Brody still had a love for animals. The boy had definitely brought home his share of strays. Once they decided the dog was comfortable, they left her to do what comes naturally. Brody ran upstairs to wash up and change shirts, and Daisy headed to the kitchen to wash her hands. Lily joined her and whispered in her ear, So, do you want to tell me about you and Brody having lunch together, and then he stayed with you after everyone left? Daisy smiled at her twin. Of course I want to tell you, silly. Her eyes sparkled. Brody is interested in me. He wants to date me. Lily squealed and jumped up and down and hugged her sister. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. Daisy, he's so hot. This is so cool and so unexpected. It's like out of the blue, right? Daisy smiled. Well, apparently it's not out of the blue. He says he's liked me for a long time, for years. Actually, he said as long as he can remember, he's had his eye on me. Oh, wow, Daisy, that is so romantic. I know, right? She got quiet. It actually makes me feel special. That's 'cause you are, silly girl. Well, I don't know about all that, but, being a twin, being a second set of twins, it's like I don't know. I can't explain it. You don't have to. I get it. finding our own identity is hard. But I'm so proud of you, Daisy, and God sees you. You. Not a twin, not a sister. You. And now I'm so excited about what you and Brody might become. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Daisy said. They both got quiet when they heard someone clear their throat. They turned to see Miss Caroline come from the pantry door. Daisy's eyes got wide. She wondered if Brody's mom had heard what they were talking about. The beautiful woman had a pleasant look on her face as she went to place a few platters on the countertop. She nodded and smiled at the girls. Lily and Daisy smiled at her. "Hey, Miss Caro." She smiled. "Hey, ladies. Are y'all about ready to eat?" They nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Carol smiled. "Good. Well, come on out. We're about to have the blessing." The girls nodded, and Carol put her hand on Daisy's shoulder. "And your sister's right, Daisy. God sees you." She paused. "And my son also sees you," she whispered. Daisy's mouth dropped open as she watched Brody's mother turn and leave the kitchen through the dining room doors. New scene. In the music room, Violet, Logan, and Gracie worked on the special number that they just knew was going to blow everyone away. They knew because the children's voices were blowing them away. Violet played the piano with Gracie sitting beside her. Logan played his guitar, and the children sang their parts perfectly. And then it was the verse Logan was to sing alone, and while he was singing, though, he was suddenly interrupted. Both Noah and Abraham jerked as if they'd been shocked and then started to cry. Logan stopped playing and knelt down in front of them. "What's the matter, guys?" Noah rubbed his fist over his eyes. "Melody," he said. "Melody? What about Melody?" Logan asked kindly. "She's hurt," Abraham said. Logan's brow furrowed. Immediately he put his guitar down and headed toward the door to find Jeffy. He slid open the pocket door and Jeffy stood there. "Oh, Logan, I was just coming to get you. I think you should call Melody. She's hurt. She's okay, but call her." "Well, I was just coming to see you, Aunt Jeffy, because Abe and Noah just started crying, saying that Melody is hurt." Jeffy looked past Logan to the kids. "Really?" While Jeffy went to speak with the children, Logan nodded as he pulled out his phone and called Melody, and she answered on the first ring. "Hello," she said with a sniff. "Are you crying?" "Maybe," she said softly. "Are you hurt?" "A little bit." "Melody, what happened? Are you okay?" "Some guy hurt me." "How did you know?" "We'll talk about that later. Tell me what this guy did." She sighed. "Well, we were out giving out backpacks to the people, and this one guy, obviously on something, he said he thought I was pretty, and he grabbed me by the arm, and I tried to get him to let go of me, but he wouldn't. And then my brother came over and pried his hand off of me, and the guy got mad and pushed me and told me to get away from him. I wasn't expecting him to push me, and I lost my balance, and I fell off the sidewalk and into the street, and I scraped up my arm and cut my hand, but I'm okay." Logan closed his eyes a moment, trying to get himself under control. "Okay, Melody, that's it. No more. You can't go out to do this thing anymore unless I'm with you." "Excuse me?" "You're too tiny, too pretty, too much of a target." "Logan, I get that you're trying to protect me, and I get that it's frustrating to hear that I got hurt, and you're not here to do anything about it, but I'm okay. Really, I am. It was no big deal." "Are you telling me that you're going to go ahead and do this when I've asked you not to?" "Well, you didn't ask me. You told me. And either way, the answer is yes. You were kind enough to make a huge donation, and I'm going to use up that money until it's gone." He sighed. "Well, save some of that money for when I get back. It's only 5 more days. Can't you wait until I get back? Please?" "That's more like it. Yes, I can wait after we give out the backpacks we have today." "Well, how many more do you have to give out?" "We had 100, and there's only about 20 more. Where are you right now?" "I'm sitting on the curb talking to you and watching Lyle and Philip talk to a few homeless people and hand them the backpacks." "Did you get the cut on your hand taken care of?" "Not yet, but I'm using my old shirt to press on it." "Well, how bad is it?" "It's not bad. Like I won't need stitches if that's what you mean." He blew out a breath. "Okay. So how did you know? Your Aunt Jeffy?" "Well, yes and no. Apparently, we have a couple more psychics in the family." "Really? Who?" "Noah and Abraham." "Oh, wow. They knew I was hurt?" Yes, they started crying, saying Melody is hurt. Then Jeffy came to tell me the same thing. Crazy. Right? He paused. Hey, Mel, they're calling us together for prayer. Gotta go. I'll call you later tonight. You stay safe until then. She giggled. I will. Bye, Logan. Bye. He hung up and headed into the dining room where everyone had gathered. John Apple had just called on Adams to say the blessing on the food when the inn door opened. Got enough for 2 more people? Keegan asked as he carried Iris into the room. Dad, Violet said, I'm surprised to see you. Well, your mom kicked us out. She made us leave. She wanted me and Iris to be here with all of you, and said she wanted to rest. Well, Lisa Stewart responded, she probably wasn't lying. That's true, Lena added. Mom says she feels like she just can't get enough sleep. Well, her body is having to work extra hard to make enough milk. It makes us tired with just 1 baby. With 2, she's going to be tired for a while, Jeffy added. Well, anyway, of course there's enough, Daddy, Lily said. We have a lot of people here tonight with our firefighting friends and our agents, but we're minus Rose and Jericho, so you can fill in for them. Keegan, Breeze was just about to say the blessing, John said, and I have a bunch of very tired people here who have worked hard all day and would like to eat dinner and get their babies to bed. You sure do, Shelley said, and I have to get me to bed too. Keegan nodded, and I have one too who needs bed, so by all means, let's do this. They all bowed their heads to pray, and dinner was served. There were 3 different kinds of pasta dishes, salads, rolls, soups, and desserts, and there was more than enough for all. They had to sit some of the people at the breakfast table, and some simply ate in the lobby on their laps. Those turned out mostly to be the young people, Gabe and Taylor, young Eric and Jordan, JoJo and Logan, Brody and Daisy, and Lily, Melena, Charlie, and Matt Stewart. Peyton and Lucas Murphy were having a family dinner with their mom, Rebecca, and her guy, Dalton. His actual name was Andrew Dalton, but everyone simply called him Dalton. Dalton was now Ameritex, assistant agent in charge of the Southeast Division. Halfway through the meal, Brody made his way to check in on the dog, and he came back to Daisy with a smile. How is she? Daisy asked. Well, there's 1 puppy so far, and she's working on the 2nd. What are you talking about? Josie demanded. Where is there a puppy? That got all of the children's attention. Brody smiled. Daisy and I found a dog in the woods, and she's about to have puppies, and we brought her home. You did? Can I see? Jamie said. Brody nodded. I can let you go in 1 person at a time if you are very quiet and don't touch her or her puppies. Not yet, anyway. They started to get up right away. Wait, their sister Jordan said quickly. After you finish eating. Aw, they complained. Can't we just go now? You're so mean. Young Eric raised a brow. Excuse me? They glanced at him. Oh, sorry, Jamie said immediately. Sorry, Josie whispered. Young Eric reached out and patted Josie's head. Don't worry, I understand. It's hard to resist puppies, but you'll have plenty of time to see them. I'll go with you when you're finished eating. Josie smiled up at him. Young Eric had rescued her and himself from kidnappers, and she was still in hero worship mode. He knew he had to be careful with her fragile emotions. For that matter, he had to be careful with his own, and with Jordan, who had also been through hell. Well, I may not be a little kid, Gabe said, but once all the kids have had a turn to see the doggy, then I'm going in there too. I never doubted that, Gabe, Lena quipped. New scene. It's Tuesday evening, 8:30 p.m. at the Tanner home, Pine Forest, Georgia. Jericho walked with Rose up the giant porch steps to the front door of the Tanner home. Rose turned and smiled. I usually invite you in, but for some reason it feels different. Good, he said with a smile. Why is that good? Because something has changed, and you feel that change. Our relationship is changing. It's growing. It's expanding. She frowned. Well, I don't know about all that. He smiled. Well, I do. And you will when you allow yourself to see it. The reason it feels different, like you said, is because it's not so casual anymore, like the casual friendship we'd fallen into. It changed, Rose, when I kissed you, and I'm about to do that again. Her eyes opened wide. Oh, but what if someone sees us? Oh, I hope they do, he said softly. Rose leaned against the screen door and looked up at the guy who was trying to mess with her heart. She sighed. Well, Jericho Jones, I did have a very nice time. Well, Rose, I did too. Just being in your company, watching you as you speak, listening to your brilliant mind and your earnestness, your businesslike attitude that switches to playful and then back to business, really, everything about you. It's like an amusement park ride, so enjoyable and disappointing only when it's over. He reached out with his thumb to touch the corner of her mouth. You have some chocolate right there. She licked her lips, which made him smile. He reached out with one hand to touch her at the waist on her right side, and then let his hand slide down to the front of her hip. And she gasped, What are you doing? He chuckled. I was checking to see if you were carrying your sidearm. She snorted, which made him laugh. Well, Rosie, I guess I need to let you go in and let you get some sleep. She sighed. I am tired. I actually really need to go over to the center and get some of the paperwork done. Tonight? She nodded. He shook his head. Absolutely not. Her eyebrows rose. I mean, he went on, your agent went home before our date. He probably is sound asleep and you need to rest. And Rose, I promise you, if you maybe go in a little earlier in the morning, you'll get done in 1 hour what might take you 2 hours tonight. Rose sighed. That's probably true. Go rest, babe. I'll see you in the morning to get done anything that needs doing before we head over to the high school for the big meeting. She nodded. He moved close and she looked up at him, her heart rate doubling. Good night, Rose, he said softly as he lowered his head and kissed her. He took his time, prolonging the kiss as much as possible. He was certain it was more than he should do on a first date. She swayed slightly and he held her tighter. Finally, he lifted his head and stepped back. He shook his head. You are intoxicating. She smiled. Good night, Jericho. Dreamily, she opened the front door and slipped inside. She headed straight to the stairs, but stopped when she heard her father's voice in his office. Yes, right, and send that report first thing in the morning. I'll look it over and advise. No, you are absolutely right. Good work, Agent Burke. Keegan looked up as Rose peeked her head inside the door of his office. Hi, honey. Hi, Dad. Working late? He nodded. Some things can't wait. He smiled at her. Looks like things went well on your date. Her eyes narrowed, and he pointed to the monitor up on the wall opposite his desk. She frowned. Daddy, she whined. I'm sorry, honey, but I know that you know the camera's there. I got a notice there was someone at the door. I just glanced up. I saw it was you. I tried not to watch, but looked up at one point, and he was kissing you. I immediately looked away, I promise. Yeah, right, he frowned. I don't lie, little lady, and I have no desire to watch a full-grown man kiss my baby girl. She giggled and then sighed. Well, I'm tired. I'm going to go try to get some sleep. Another big day tomorrow. He nodded and stood and opened his arms, and she came to him and hugged him and kissed his cheek. Is Mom okay? She's great, and I'm going in the morning to get her and bring her and the babies home. I'm so glad she's going to make it home for Thanksgiving. Me too. Things could be a whole lot worse, so I'm so very grateful. He kissed the top of her head. Now go to bed. Yes, sir, she said with a laugh. Wearily, she made her way to the stairs. There was a light blood stain on the wood of the floor at the bottom of the steps. They'd used hydrogen peroxide, and it had lightened it up, but she could still see the stain. She looked up at the place where she'd been told Gabe found her mom. To think of her mom lying there in pain, probably very much afraid that she was going to have to leave her family. Rose shuddered and continued up to the hallway. Gabe was just coming out of Iris's room. Hey, little bro, Rose said softly. Did you get her to sleep? I think so. She wanted to sleep with me again, but I need to sleep too. Rose smiled. Oh, I understand. Heather opened the door of her room and looked out in the hallway. Oh, good, Rose, you're home. We're having a meeting, so come in. Rose sighed. Okie dokie then. Gabe started to his room. And you too, Gabe, if you don't mind. He looked up, surprised. Me? Yes, you. Do you know another Gabe? He grinned. Yes. There's the guy in the football team and the guy at the grocery store, and then there's the angel. She rolled her eyes. Get in here, little boy. They went into the room. Heather had a seat in her desk chair and swirled it around to face the bed. The other 5 siblings sat on the bed in various positions. Heather drew a deep breath. Okay, everyone, I have something I want to discuss with you. It's kind of about me, but it also can affect you too, so I wanted to run it by you and see what you think. When no one responded, she went on. So, my last name is Anderson, as we are all but one of my sisters, or 2 of my sisters now, and I know and understand why my name has remained Anderson. When Daddy married our mother, he wanted to honor our biological father by allowing us to keep his name, and I guess that is indeed a way to honor him. But in some ways, it also keeps us, meaning me, Rose, Violet, Daisy, and Lily, it keeps us in the past, like in the mode of mourning and honoring the man who gave us life. And in a few months, or I guess probably about 5 or 6 months, I'm not sure, I will be sending out wedding invitations, inviting people we know and love to see me, Heather, who is the daughter of Keegan Tanner, who was raised, loved, and cared for by Keegan Tanner, to marry Nolan Sawyer, who was the son of Thomas Sawyer, and my name should be Heather Tanner. Her sisters all sat up straighter as she finally got to her point. I don't mean to be disrespectful to my biological father. I know he was a good man. I know he died a hero. I know he loved our mother and he loved us for the short time that he knew us. But to be honest, I'm the oldest and I have almost no recollection of the man. He's just a vague shadow in my memory. I was loved and raised by a man named Keegan Tanner, and I loved that man as my father, and I love him with all my heart, and he's the only father I've ever known. Gabe, I don't know how you would feel about this. You've always been the firstborn child of your biological father. You've always had the privilege of being a Tanner. Our own mother has the privilege of being a Tanner, but us girls, we don't get that privilege. Gabe blinked up at his sister. Heather, I have never lorded it over you or acted like condescending towards you, have I? It has never crossed my mind that you were anything other than my older sister whom I truly love. I know that, Gabe, and I truly love you too, and I've never thought those things of you, nor have I been resentful of you. Still, there have been many times over the years that I felt, I don't know, I guess I felt left out, maybe jealous, though I know the reason is for keeping our biological father's last name. I always wanted to be a full-fledged member of the Tanner family. She looked at her sisters. Am I the only one who's ever felt this way? Am I just being bitter or contentious? Am I the only one? No, Rose said quickly, you are not the only one. There have been many times over my life that I wanted my father's name. And Mom would probably say that I have my father's name. But Keegan Tanner is my father. Like you said, Heather, he's the only father I've ever known, and I want to be his daughter in name. I know he loves me. I know he loves us, and I would love to have his name. Would that bother you, Gabe? No, it wouldn't bother me at all, not even one single bit. And listening to what you're saying, I completely understand why you would want this. It's nice, I guess, to honor Bradley Anderson. I met him when I was in that coma. He's a really nice guy, and he knows and understands that my father is your father. He wanted our mom to move on, to remarry, to be happy. He wouldn't want you to stay in a perpetual state of mourning his death by keeping his name. I don't know why we haven't brought this up before now. All these years. Have you been feeling this way? The girls all sniffed and dabbed at their eyes. Violet shook her head. I don't know that I've felt this way. Like Heather said, I understood and I just accepted it. But I guess I secretly yearn to have my father's name too. Lily and Daisy, Heather said, what are your feelings? Daddy, Keegan Tanner, is the only father we've ever known. He's the one who supports us and cares for us and disciplines us and protects us and loves us. And I would take on the Tanner name in a half second, Lily said. Daisy sniffed. I usually just accept my fate, no matter what that is. I usually just go with the flow. Life is what it is. So all this time, I just accepted that I have to have my biological father's name. I didn't really question it. And then someone, just today, made me think about who I am, the kind of person I am. And I think that this individual person that is Daisy should definitely be Daisy Tanner, named after the man who has been everything to me. Okay, so if we're all agreed that this is a worthwhile pursuit, I intend to do just that, Heather said. I want to change my name to Tanner as soon as possible so that I can be a Tanner on my wedding invitation. I realize this is silly in a way because right after that I'll be taking on my husband's name. But even if it's for a few months, I want to be legally a Tanner. Now, I can go about this two ways. The first is I can just petition the courts to legally change my name from Anderson to Tanner. The second, and the way I really want to go, is I can ask Daddy if he will adopt me. As she said the words, her voice broke. Her siblings all jumped up from the bed and put their arms around her for a giant group hug. I'm sorry, she said, for being so emotional, but as I said the words, I realized just how much I've wanted this for so long. I've been yearning for this, for Dad to adopt me. Gabe got pretty emotional at those words, and he had to step back and clear his throat. I'm sorry, guys, that I never thought about what this would mean to you. And I just realized that if I feel guilty and sorry for not realizing this, then Dad is going to feel that way too. Which brings us to the next problem or decision, Rose said. How do we go about asking Dad if he'll adopt us? And you have to think about Mom too, Lily said. Heather nodded. I don't want to alienate Mom. Maybe we should talk to Mom first before we present it to Dad and make sure that she's okay with it. Because if she's not okay with it, then I guess we'll shelve it. Gabe thought about that. No way. No way was he going to let them push down this beautiful and righteous desire and shelve it to think about another day. They brought him in on this, and he intended to make sure that his sisters became his sisters legally. He'd been blessed to be a Tanner his whole life, and they deserved that too. He drew a deep breath. Hey, my sisters, he said lovingly. Mom will be fine with it, and Dad will too, I guarantee it. And I'd love it too, because it would be so cool to finally not have to explain to people why we have different last names, he joked, trying to lighten the mood. It worked. They all giggled. Yes, poor Gabe. Life has been so hard for him, Rose jested. That's right, Violet said. Let's get this done for Gabe's sake. Right, Heather said, because everything is always about Gabe. He grinned. Now y'all are getting it. New scene. It is November 27th, 6 a.m., Wednesday morning, Pine Forest Country Inn, Pine Forest, Georgia. Ricky came up behind his wife as she stood in the bathroom, looking in the mirror, straightening her blouse, smoothing her hair, then spraying on some light cologne. That brought him closer to sniff and then nuzzle her neck. He raised his head and looked into her eyes in the mirror with a smile. In case I haven't said it lately, I want you to know that I love you more than ever. I'm so proud to call you my wife. Bree smiled at him in the mirror. I love you too, Ricky Kino, and I'm proud to have you as my husband. He sighed. Remember way back when you wanted to call me your brother? She frowned. Why bring that up? Because that was such a hard time for me, and it's good to remember the hard times so that we can appreciate the good times even more. She nodded. Well, Ricky, there have been a lot of hard times. Choose a different one to reminisce about. He chuckled and then turned her around. Feisty as always, my love. She rested her hands up on his broad shoulders, and he circled her slim waist with his hands. He brought her forward and kissed her. She sighed. So, are you excited about going to see our new house? He nodded. Yes, because I have a feeling it will be a place where we're going to make a lot of awesome memories. She smiled. Me too. I'm so happy that we decided to do this. Well, with the way things seem to be going with Gabe and Taylor, I think having our own place nearby is a must. Me too. So let's get to it. I've been very patient so far. We've been here 2 days, and I haven't even asked to drive over for a peek. Well, you knew there was no time. Well, right, and if we don't hurry today, there still won't be time, so let's go. The big meeting is at 11, and Rose wants us there by 10. Okay, let's hit the road. You want to pick up some breakfast on the way? She shook her head. Not on the way. Let's go to the house and make a list and grab something to eat before the meeting. He sighed. Yes, ma'am. She giggled. You sound so disappointed. Are you hungry? He nodded. But that's okay. There are people in this world who haven't eaten for days, so I can wait. That reminds me, Rick, what you said in our prayer this morning. You got me all choked up. He grinned. I know. I heard you sniff. Before she could get mad, he kissed her quickly and they headed out. At the bottom of the stairs, they were stopped by Jody, who held a paper bag out to them with a smile. Good morning, you two, Jody said. I know you must be so excited about seeing your house in person. Lily made you some breakfast. She said if Ricky Kino is anything like her brother, he's going to be thinking about breakfast. Ricky chuckled. What a smart young lady. Jody smiled. Let John and I know if there's anything you need and take pictures. But I have to confess, John and I have driven past the place several times over the past few months, and it looks amazing. Bree smiled. Oh, I can't wait. Come on, Ricky, let's go. John came in the door right then and held the keys out to Ricky. Here you go, Rick. I pulled your rental around to the front. You know, this service at this joint is top-notch, Ricky quipped. Oh, we aim to please, John said. Have fun, neighbor. Neighbor, Ricky repeated with a nod. That sounds pretty cool. It is pretty cool. They headed out. Ricky helped his wife into the vehicle, got in, and drove away out the large iron gate of the inn to the right, down the paved road and turned right, then to the state road and turned right. They drove 4.2 miles and turned left onto County Line Road, drove 2 miles and then turned right onto Magnolia Drive, and one more right on Taylor Mill. The name of the street being one reason they bought the property. Once on Taylor Mill, the new Kino property began almost immediately on the left. It was now surrounded by a pillared fence. The pillars were made of white brick. The ironwork was also white. It ran along the entire property line. From the corner, it ran off to the side of the property and disappeared over the hill and around a bend. Along the front of the property, it continued for almost a mile, broken up right in the center by a large, beautiful white brick entrance wall with a motorized white iron gate. The landscaping along the large walls was lovely, and Bree could imagine it being filled with flowers in the spring. They punched in the code and drove through the gate as it swung wide. The drive was lovely, lined on either side by dogwood trees that were currently bare, but Bree had seen the pictures of how they'll look in the spring, and it was very exciting. They drove up the long, straight drive that led toward the exact middle of the house. As they approached, the house loomed large on the hill. The drive came to the beginning of a circle and changed from concrete to cobbled brick, and it was extremely charming. It circled around to the front of the house in a roundabout type setup. One could park on the circle and head up the steps to the house, or continue on around the circle and turn right, which led off toward the left side of the home that led to a large garage that was probably a carriage house at one time, with all the same charm as the architecture of the home. The home itself was giant, white with black shutters. 6 wide, white, fluted columns stood stately along the front of the house. Then more columns continued down each side and across the back. There was a balcony that circled the entire home, giving shelter to the wide porch beneath. It was truly a magnificent old Southern home, built in the 1800s with much history, both good and bad. They would work hard to bless the home and the land and bring nothing but light to the area. They parked in front and went to the wide staircase that led to the beautiful arched double-door front entryway. Halfway up the 13 steps leading toward the front door, Bree and Ricky stopped and turned to take more pictures. Standing on those stairs, looking out to the left or right of the tree-lined drive, was a lovely, lush expanse of green. Off to the left was a lovely reflection pond with a stately oak next to it, and under that oak was a bench, and attached to that oak was a swing. That area alone had been the selling point in Bree's mind, because she could see Eric and Jordan, or Taylor and Gabe out there under that tree, or meandering around the 130 acres of land. If she went a little further into the future, she could see them, pushing their own children on that swing. The home had only been a little over $2 million, and they could spend about $1 million in renovations, and they would spend about $1 million in renovations inside and out, including a giant, luxurious pool and outdoor living spaces and cabanas. The extra land had been an additional $600,000. It was incredible. To buy a home like this in Cali would be closer to $30 million or more. When they weren't here, they would use the hotel experts, Lisa Stewart and Jody Apple, to offer it as a vacation rental, and they would eventually build cottages on the property. A little Kino village for all of their family. They stood before the front door, and Ricky put in the code on the lockbox and removed the keys, and he smiled at Bree. "Shall we pray before we go in?" She smiled and nodded. "You want to, or shall I?" he said. "You," she said softly as her eyes filled with tears. He took her in his arms, held her close, and prayed. He gave thanks. He asked to know God's will for this place. He blessed the home and property with the light of Christ. He asked to use it for the building of God's kingdom and for the training of God's warriors in one way or another. He asked it to be sanctuary from the darkness of the world, and he did it all in Jesus' name. They unlocked the door and went in. It took their breath away. The feel, the light, the spirit that was there immediately made them emotional. "Wow," Bree said softly. "I mean, you just don't get it on the internet. Even when the designer sent all her photos, I just didn't get how big, how elegant, how stately the place is." "Oh, they did a great job," Ricky said. They stood in a giant entrance foyer that was larger than their own living room, which was at many times compared to a hotel lobby, so that meant this little entrance foyer was vast. There were beautiful hardwood floors. The space was so large that from where they stood by the door, they could see 3 11 by 16 feet large area rugs in a row and still see plenty of the shiny hardwood floors that they lay on. The rugs were done in blues and whites. There were benches against the walls in the area of the second large area rug. Above the benches were gigantic gold-framed mirrors. There were 2 large crystal chandeliers, and the walls were trimmed with some of the most amazing, detailed, intricate trim work they'd ever seen. Looking forward as far as they could see, trying to take it all in, they could actually see all the way to the back of the house, where there were 3 giant windows looking out over the back of the property. To the right of the front door was the beginning of a grand staircase. To the left of the front door was the same. Their eyes followed the stairs on either side up to a balcony area, which was very high because the ceilings where they currently stood were 15-foot ceilings. "I don't think I can take it all in," Bree said softly. Ricky smiled. "Let's try." They walked straight back from the area between the 2 staircases where the first area rug lay, past 2 giant indoor columns to the next area rug where there were benches against the opposite walls and giant mirrors, all the way back to the last area rug where there was a seating area with 2 large settees facing each other and 2 smaller chairs with a beautiful antique table between them. They peered out the giant windows to the greens and golds and browns outside. If they were to turn left from there, they would head to the kitchen. Instead, they turned right, where they came upon first another large living area, which they had the designer turn into a den for casual living. Also on that side of the home was a music room, a large library/study, and 2 bathrooms and 2 large bedrooms. They meandered through the large rooms, always taking time to peek out the windows to get a feel of where that room was in respect to the property. Finally, they came back to that center area and then headed to the left to find an enormous and beautifully updated state-of-the-art kitchen. It had loads of natural light, so bright and airy, and it had doors that led outside and another door that came in from the garage, and turning left out of the kitchen, leading back toward the front of the house, was a dining room with 3 giant dining room tables. Each table was laden with an opulent flower arrangement, and each had its own buffet against the side wall. And through an open arched doorway on the other side of the dining room was what could only be called a ballroom. A huge, large, open room with mirrors and columns. One of the walls had a lovely mural with the dogwood blossoms framing a lake. The entrance to the ballroom was through intricately carved pocket doors that led back to the front entrance foyer. Ricky pushed the doors open and they stood back in the foyer. The whole thing was more than Bree could ever imagine. Bree just stood there shaking her head. You okay, babe? Ricky asked. I thought our house back in Cali was giant, fancy, extraordinary. I almost felt guilty living there, but next to this, it seems small and humble. I really did not get the gist of how this home is when I saw it online when we purchased it, or with all the pictures of the designer sent us as she worked. This place is just amazing. Ricky nodded. It is something. There's only one thing it doesn't have. Bree raised her eyebrows. What? The ocean. She nodded. You're right. But the time we spend here, it's going to be a really nice time. Yes, it is, Bree. Mostly because any time with you is nice. His low key had her looking into his eyes, and she smiled. Okay, I get it. Yes, I'm blown away by all of this grandeur, and it might take me a little bit of time to get used to it, but I promise I won't let materialism take over my life or my mind. What is it you always say? We could live in tents in the desert and be just as happy? He nodded. Right. And I'm thinking we might do some camping soon to make sure we remember that. And that is the end of chapter 9. I want to go see